Hi, my name is Tyler, and I truly thought that I had everything going right for me. I had an amazing job working for one of the most successful companies in the world, and I was quickly moving up in the company. On top of that, I had a wonderful wife named Susie, who I loved more than anything in the whole world. She was always full of energy and talked a mile a minute.
Oh, hey, hon. Listen, I wanted to make chicken for dinner, but the store didn't have any peas. And you know how I love eating peas for when I make chicken. So I drove around town trying to find some that weren't frozen, and I just couldn't...
Whoa there, hon. I just got through the door. Just give me a minute to kiss you before you start talking. She was the light of my life, and I couldn't imagine a life without her. That is, until one day, my boss asked me to work late, which wasn't unusual, but when I got curious and asked him why, he got cagey. Hey boss, I don't mind putting in some overtime, but why the sudden increase in workload? I thought that we were all caught up. No, I couldn't finish the last parts to this task, and so I need you to do it for me. But if you stay, then we could finish together and much quicker too. I can't. I have an appointment that I need to go to. So listen, just get that task done, all right? There was something very odd about the way that my boss was acting very strangely, and once he left, I couldn't help but head to his office to see what had caused him to act oddly. For all I knew, he was telling the truth, and he did have an appointment to get to, but we had always been fairly close, and he had always told me where he was going and what he was doing. I knew it really wasn't my place to pry, but I was just so curious, and so once I knew that he was gone, I crept into his office and checked his desk for any indication of where he would have went. There on his desk was a sticky note with hearts drawn around an address, and when I saw the address, my heart almost leapt out of my chest. It was my address. Not sure what it meant, I grabbed my keys and rushed home to see what was going on. When I pulled up to my house, I saw my boss's car in the driveway. I was so angry that I could barely even think straight. Filled with anger, I rushed into the house and then upstairs, where I found my wife half naked on our bed, crying, and my boss standing in front of her grinning from ear to ear. Hey, stop that crying. It's ruining the mood. He slowly stalked towards my wife, but before he could reach her, I ran up and punched him as hard as I could in the face. I didn't realize my own strength, though, and knocked him out in one punch. Susie stopped crying when she saw me and smiled briefly, but then she began to look terrified. Susie, how could you do this to me? He's my boss, for God's sake. I thought you loved me?
I do love you, and this isn't what you think it is.
What do you mean? Both of you are half naked, and my boss gave me busy work to keep me from home for hours so that you two could have an affair.
I know it looks bad, but I truly didn't want to go through with it. You don't understand.
Then you better help me to understand, because right now, all I can think about is getting a divorce. The look of terror in her eyes only intensified when I said that, and she started to cry again, but she also began to speak.
Years ago, I was out partying one night and I had a few too many drinks and I drove home. I know that it was stupid of me to do so, but I was young and dumb at the time and I hit another car and caused an accident. I panicked and I didn't know what to do, so I just drove away as quickly as I could. Somehow your boss found out and was threatening to tell you and the police about what I did. He was going to blackmail me to have sex with him, and I didn't want to. But I don't want to go to jail either. I'm so confused.
Just then, my boss regained consciousness and slipped away without me noticing, as I was too preoccupied with my wife and didn't keep an eye on him. He ran straight to the police to press charges against me for assaulting him and to tell the police about Susie's accident. Meanwhile, though, I knew that I couldn't stay mad at Susie as she was being blackmailed and didn't want to cheat on me. Plus, I had interrupted them before anything could actually happen, which didn't make it okay, but it did make it easier to forgive. However, when it came to her accident, it was very hard to wrap our heads around it. I forgave her, of course, as it had happened years ago, and she hadn't touched alcohol ever since, but we didn't know what would happen if my boss went to the police. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on our front door, and when we answered it, my boss was standing there with a few police officers. Sir, we received a few reports about you and your wife. Did you hit this man? Yes, officer, I did. He was blackmailing my wife and trying to force her to have sex with him, and when I caught him, I did punch him. Wait, he was doing what? Sir, is this true? Were you blackmailing this woman to sleep with you? Well, yes, but she did do something truly terrible. Shouldn't you be arresting them? As far as I'm concerned, You were trying to blackmail and assault his wife, and he assaulted you. It's not exactly a fair trade, but I don't see why they can't just cancel each other out. As for you, miss, I'm sorry, but we're going to need to take you with us. Susie quickly hugged and kissed me, and then went with the officers. My boss also quickly left as he took one look at me and got very frightened. I didn't know what would happen to my wife, so I started making some phone calls to lawyers to find out if any of them could help her. At the same time, I called my boss's superior and told him what he had done. I was very surprised when he complimented me on being able to knock him out with one punch. Once that was done, I head down to the police station and check to see if I could bail my wife out or if they had even charged her with anything. Thankfully, I didn't need to, but they had set up a court date for her. Her case was rather unusual since it had happened so many years ago, and there was no way to test her to see if she had been drinking that night. And so I took her home, and we spoke at length with the attorney that I had found. The weeks passed, and the date of Susie's trial came up, and alone, she was forced to stand in court and be addressed by a judge. You are being tried for the crimes of driving while under the influence, disorderly conduct, fleeing the scene of an accident, and reckless driving. Do you understand the charges that I laid out for you?
Yes, Your Honor. I confess to all of that, and I don't know if it matters, but I am truly sorry about what happened. And as a result, I haven't had a drink since then.
I could tell that the judge was considering what she had to say, but then in twist, he called up someone from the back of the room. Mr. Summers, you were in the car that the defendant hit. You have heard her apology. Sir, this is rather unorthodox, but do you feel that she feels remorse for what happened? I looked at this Mr. Summers. He was older than us, and he looked my wife in the eyes for a few minutes before turning towards the judge. Yes, Your Honor, I think that she does. It was many years ago, and I might have felt differently at the time, but forgive her for what happened, and I do feel like she regrets it. The judge agreed and sentenced my wife to house arrest. She was forced to wear an ankle monitor and couldn't leave the house except to complete the charity work that he assigned to her. He gave her over 200 community hours and 1 full year of house arrest. Both my wife and I breathed easier when that decision was announced. It would still be full of hardships, but it could have been so much worse. As for my boss, though, he had figured that he would walk away unscathed, and once we were back at work, he began treating me terribly and only ever assigned the worst jobs to me. It was clear that he was trying to get me to quit, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of doing so. That only went on for a week when upper management called him into their office for a private meeting. He was in there for only 5 minutes when security burst out of the office, dragging him. They dragged him out of the building and threw him onto the sidewalk outside. I was so surprised that I was in shock when upper management called me into their office next. I was so worried that they were going to fire me next, but as it turned out, they had taken pity on me. They knew that my boss was trying to blackmail my wife, and I had only been defending her. Once they heard that, they fired him and chose to keep me. In fact, they asked if I would want my boss's former job, and I accepted the offer on the spot. That night when I went home, I told Susie about what had happened, and she was so thrilled for me. Over the next year, it was rather hard, but eventually the ankle monitor was removed, and we were able to return back to our old lives, granted with a much more substantial income than before. Our future was looking very good. My former boss, though, never recovered. His name was always blackmarked because of what he had done, and so he could never get a job in our field ever again. He did look for all kinds of jobs and was forced to settle as a clerk at a gas station and make just minimum wage. From what I heard, his marriage fell apart both because he lost his job and for how he had done so. His wife told their children, and they took her side, so he was left all alone and miserable. However, he had no one else to blame but himself. Thanks for watching.